All right, so are you ready to dive into another case with me? This one takes us to Cape Coral, Florida, back in 1990.
Ooh, Florida, 1990. Sounds like we've got some true crime on our hands.
Definitely a case that will have you on the edge of your seat.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Okay, so we're going to unpack the story of Jan Cornell. She was a single mom raising two daughters. Jeannie, the oldest, was 18, and then there was 11-year-old Robin.
A single mom, you said.
Yeah, and by all accounts, she was a dedicated mother.
It's always so sad when a family is broken apart by something like, well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a story that doesn't have a happy ending. Robin, the youngest daughter, seemed like a truly special kid, loved the outdoors, always thinking of others.
The kind of kid that just brightens up a room.
Exactly, just a bright spark. And then there was Lisa's story.
Lisa's story.
She was a friend of Jan's who had recently moved in as a roommate.
So Jan, her two daughters, and a roommate, Lisa.
Got it. Now, picture this. May 9th, 1990. Jan's found love again with a guy named Donnie.
A new love interest. Okay, this is starting to sound like a soap opera already.
Well, hold on, because it takes a dark turn. They decide to go catch a basketball game at Donnie's place, but get this, Jan almost stayed home.
Oh. Why is that?
The game went into overtime. She was worried about getting to work on time the next morning. Can you believe it? Those little what-ifs, right?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like how one small decision can change everything.
It's chilling to think about. But anyway, Jan ends up going to Donnie's, leaves Robin at home with Lisa. It seems like a normal night, everyone hanging out, having some beers.
Typical weeknight, relaxing at home. What could go wrong?
That's what's so unsettling about all of this. Because
Yeah.
then, around 4 a.m., Jan wakes up in a panic.
Oh no. What happened?
She had to be at work at 4:30.
Yikes. Talk about a rude awakening.
So she rushes home. But when she gets there, both locks on her front door are bolted from the inside.
Wait, what?
Bolted from the inside. Imagine that sinking feeling, realizing someone else is inside your home.
Oh my God. That's terrifying. So what did John do?
Well, she hears footsteps inside, and she knows it can't be Robin or Lisa.
Her heart must have been pounding in her chest. What did she do?
She thought it might be a robbery, so she ran to the back of the condo, finds the patio gate and sliding door wide open.
Okay, so maybe whoever was inside got spooked and ran off.
Possibly. But then she steps inside, and the first thing she sees is a collection of family pictures.
Family pictures. What about them?
They had been taken off the wall and neatly placed on an ironing board. It's like the intruder wanted her to see them.
Okay, now that's just creepy. That sends chills down my spine.
It gets worse. Jan rushes to Robin's room and, well, it's every parent's worst nightmare.
Oh no. Please tell me.
Robin was dead. It was clear she had been sexually assaulted. The scene was horrific.
Oh God. That's just, I can't even imagine. How could someone do something so awful?
It's beyond comprehension. Jan immediately calls 911 and tries to perform CPR on Robin, even though she knew it was too late.
In that moment, the world must have just stopped.
And amidst the chaos and grief, there's another horrifying discovery.
What do you mean? What else could have happened?
Jan keeps asking the police to wake up Lisa, but they tell her it's not possible.
You're kidding. No.
Lisa's dead too. Both of them murdered in their own home.
My God. This is just unbelievable. So what happened next? What did the police find?
Well, they arrive and start searching for clues, of course. The condo is a mess, drawers emptied, furniture overturned. Typical robbery scene, right?
Yeah, it sounds like the intruder was looking for something specific. Maybe money, jewelry.
But here's the thing, most of the valuables were untouched. It's this strange mix of chaos and deliberate action that just doesn't add up.
Okay, so not a typical robbery then. This is getting more and more bizarre.
Right. It's like something out of one of those classic mystery novels where there's always a seemingly insignificant clue that ends up being the key to solving the case.
Oh, yeah. Like the missing dog leash or the misplaced book. What was it in this case?
Well, a few things stood out to investigators right away. For instance, Lisa had just bought her fiancé a Seiko watch.
A watch. Okay.
The box and wrapping paper were found, but the watch itself was missing.
Interesting.
Then there were these white socks found on a chair.
Socks?
Yeah, a pair of white socks, and they didn't belong to anyone in the house.
Okay, now that's definitely strange. The watch, the socks. It's like the killer was intentionally leaving behind these random clues.
It's like a breadcrumb trail leading who knows where. But it definitely added another layer to this already baffling puzzle.
I bet the police had their work cut out for them with this one. So where did the investigation go from there? Did they have any leads?
Well, remember, this was 1990. DNA technology wasn't what it is today. They could only determine blood type and race.
Ah, right. Back then, forensics was a lot more limited.
Exactly. They were able to determine that the killer was a white male with type O blood.
That narrows down the pool of suspects, but still leaves a lot of possibilities.
Definitely not enough to pinpoint a specific individual. I bet that was frustrating for everyone involved, especially for Jan. Can you imagine? Your daughter is murdered and the investigation hits a wall.
I can't even begin to imagine the pain and frustration she must have been going through.
But Jan wasn't the type to just sit back and wait for answers. Driven by grief and a burning need for justice, she decided to take matters into her own hands.
Wait, what do you mean? What did she do?
She started going to the library, researching everything she could about murder investigations, her legal rights, basically became an amateur detective herself.
Wow, that's incredible. She was determined to get justice for her daughter no matter what.
And it wasn't just behind the scenes. She became her own advocate, constantly contacting the police for updates, going down to the station, demanding answers.
She refused to let the case fade into the background. What a strong woman.
And she went public with her story, too. Started reaching out to media outlets, even appeared on national television shows, desperate to keep Robin's story in the public eye.
She was hoping that someone, somewhere, might have a piece of the puzzle. Makes sense.
It's a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? Publicity can be helpful, but it can also complicate an investigation.
Oh, definitely. It can put pressure on the police, sometimes leading to rushed decisions or even mistakes.
And it did cause some friction between Jan and law enforcement. The police wanted her to step back, let them handle things.
I can see both sides of that.
Yeah.
The police need to protect the integrity of the investigation, but Jan had every right to fight for her daughter.
Absolutely. She felt like she had a right to know what was going on, and she wasn't afraid to push back. It created this tension between the need for information and the need to protect the investigation.
Must have been a difficult situation for everyone. So we've got a heartbroken mother battling for answers, the police struggling to find a solid lead, and a community living in fear. Years pass. What happens next? Does the case go cold?
Well, it did go cold for a while, but it wasn't completely forgotten. There were these glimmers of hope that would emerge, then fade away. Like in 2001, the FBI got involved.
The FBI. Oh, wow. So this case got bumped up to the federal level.
They created a profile of the killer, one of those psychological portraits to help investigators understand the potential motivations and behaviors of the perpetrator.
Like those crime shows where they narrow down the suspects based on personality traits and stuff.
Exactly. It's a way to make sense of the evidence and try to predict how the offender might act. But even with the FBI profile, the case remained unsolved.
So they had a profile, but no real leads. What else did they try?
At one point, they even investigated 2 serial killers who were active in the area at the time, hoping to find a connection.
Really? 2 serial killers? That's intense.
But DNA evidence ruled them out. It was a frustrating time for everyone. Every time it seemed like they were getting close, it turned out to be a dead end. But Jan never gave up. She even went as far as contacting the governor of Florida.
Wow, she went all the way to the top. Yeah. What did she say?
She demanded that more be done to solve Robin's case. And her persistence paid off. The governor actually sent high-ranking officials to meet with her, assuring her they were committed to finding the killer. And then there's this interesting twist. Jan's case caught the attention of the Vidocq Society.
Wait, the Vidocq Society? Isn't that the group of, retired detectives and forensic experts who volunteer their time to help solve cold cases, like a real-life version of those crime-solving TV shows?
You got it. They reviewed the case, offering new perspectives, suggesting avenues the police might have overlooked. They even pushed the Cape Coral Police Department, questioning whether they had thoroughly investigated certain leads.
Having that fresh set of eyes on a case can be invaluable. Did the Vidocq Society's involvement lead to any breakthroughs?
Unfortunately, no. But it did bring renewed energy to the investigation, kept the case alive when it might have otherwise faded away completely, and throughout all of this, through years of dead ends and false hope, Jan never wavered in her determination to find Robin's killer.
It really is a testament to a mother's love and dedication. But after all that time, with no real leads, did anything ever come of it?
Things stayed quiet for a while, but then in 2016, 26 years after the murders, a turning point arrived. Jan was at home one morning when the doorbell rang. Her husband answered, and she heard him say just one word, Christy.
Christy? Wait, as in Detective Christy, the one assigned to Robin and Lisa's case.
The one and only.
She shows up at Jan's door after all those years.
After 26 years, Detective Christy was at the door. Jan had waited all that time for this moment.
This must be it, the moment of truth.
Christy looked at her and simply said, "We got him."
Wow, just like that, after all these years, we got him.
Hold on, I need a minute to process this. Who is him? How did they finally find him after all this time? We need answers.
We've got to take a break, but don't worry, we'll be right back to reveal the identity of the suspect and uncover how this cold case finally cracked wide open. Stay tuned. All right, so where were we? Oh yeah, Detective Krisky shows up at Jan's door after 26 years and drops that bombshell.
You got him. We got him! Chills, right? After all that waiting, they finally had a suspect. So who is this mystery man who had managed to evade capture for so long?
The man they arrested was 54-year-old Joseph Zieler.
Joseph Zieler, okay.
And get this, he was already in custody for a totally unrelated crime, battery on a law enforcement officer.
Wait, what? So this guy was just sitting in jail and nobody had any clue he might be responsible for these murders? How on earth did they connect him to the case after all these years?
It really all comes down to the incredible advancements in DNA technology. Remember how we talked about those limitations back in 1990?
Yeah, they could only determine blood type and race, which wasn't enough to pinpoint a suspect.
Exactly. But as DNA technology progressed, investigators gained the ability to extract more information from even the tiniest samples.
It's like magic, isn't it?
It really is pretty amazing what science can do. So in 2016, investigators decided to resubmit the DNA evidence from Robin and Lisa's case. They were hoping these new techniques would yield something they'd missed before.
And this is where that CODIS database comes in.
Just got it.
For those of us who aren't familiar, could you break down what exactly that is?
Sure. So imagine a massive database, but instead of names and addresses, it's filled with DNA profiles from convicted felons.
I see.
It's called CODIS, and it's an incredibly powerful tool for investigators. They can take DNA from a crime scene, run it through this database, and see if there's a match to someone already in the system.
So they ran the DNA from Robin and Lisa's case through CODIS,
Here they go. They got a hit.
and it matched.
Joseph Zieler. Remember, he was already in custody for that battery charge, so his DNA was in the system.
Oh, wow. It's almost unbelievable. This random battery charge leads them to the suspect in a 26-year-old cold case.
It just goes to show how important those databases are, even for cases that seem impossible to solve. But even with his DNA match, investigators knew they couldn't just arrest Zieler based on that alone.
Right, they needed more to solidify their case, especially with a double murder trial. What else did they find?
Well, remember those white socks found on a chair at the crime scene? The ones that didn't belong to anyone in the house.
Yeah, those always seemed really strange.
As investigators went back and reviewed the evidence photos, they noticed something peculiar about them.
What was it?
The way those socks were folded. It was a very particular way, and it triggered a memory for one of the detectives.
A detective with a sharp eye for detail. It's just like in the movies. What did he remember?
He recalled seeing a similar sock folding technique during Zieler's interview for the battery charge. It was such a specific detail that it immediately raised a red flag.
Wow, so they're looking at these photos and it clicks. This guy folds his socks weird. Could this be our link?
It sounds like something out of a TV show.
It does, doesn't it? But it was a real lead, and they weren't about to ignore it. They started digging into Zieler's past, and guess what they discovered?
What's that?
Back in 1990, he was living just 4 miles from Jan's condo. 4 miles? That's definitely close enough to have been in the area on the night of the murders. The DNA match, the sock folding thing, now the proximity. It's all starting to add up.
Right. And there's more.
Tell me.
There was also a report from 1990 about a suspicious man in a red hat in a beige car seen near the condo before the murders. At the time, it didn't lead anywhere, but investigators found out that Zieler owned a beige car back then.
So even without confirming the red hat detail, they've got a possible connection with the car too. It's really incredible how these seemingly minor details can end up playing such a crucial role. Were there any other pieces of the puzzle that helped solidify their case against Zieler?
Well, as they delved deeper into Zieler's past, a disturbing pattern emerged.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
It turned out that he had a history of violence against women.
Unfortunately, that's not uncommon in cases like this. What exactly did they find?
Investigators uncovered details of a sexual assault case from 1990. Zieler had choked and beaten his victim.
Oh.
This previous act of violence, along with all the other evidence, painted a picture of a man capable of the brutality inflicted on Robin and Lisa.
It's terrifying to think that he might have continued to hurt others if not for that battery charge and the advancements in DNA technology. So they finally have their suspect. What happened next?
Well, they had enough to arrest him, but now the real challenge began. They had to prove their case in court.
It's the courtroom showdown. We've got the arrest, the evidence, the background. Now it's time for the trial. We'll dive into that and the long-awaited quest for justice when we come back. So here we are, the final chapter in this story. After 26 years, Jan Cornell is finally face-to-face with the man accused of murdering her daughter and her roommate.
It's May of 2023, and the trial begins.
Can you even imagine the emotions she must have been going through? I mean, 26 years of waiting, hoping, wondering.
It must have felt surreal for her to finally be in the same room as Joseph Zieler, knowing that this could be the moment she gets the justice she's fought so hard for.
Absolutely. Zieler's facing some serious charges here, right?
Oh yeah, 2 counts of first-degree murder, sexual battery, and burglary. The stakes couldn't be higher.
And the prosecution seemed to have a pretty strong case, especially with that DNA evidence linking Zieler to the crime scene.
Right, but they still needed to establish a motive. Why Robin? Why Lisa? Why that night? Those are the questions that always linger in cases like this, the why that can be so hard to grasp.
It's that human element that we crave, that need to understand the reasoning behind such a senseless act. So how did the prosecution approach this?
Well, they focused on presenting a complete picture of Zieler, trying to weave together the forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and his past history of violence against women to show the jury that he was capable of these horrific acts.
And for Jan, this was her chance to finally confront the man who had turned her world upside down. Did she testify?
She did. And her testimony was incredibly powerful. She shared her memories of that night, the trauma she endured, and the relentless fight for justice that had consumed her for over 2 decades.
I bet that took incredible courage to face Zieler in court, to relive that nightmare all over again. But I imagine the defense tried to counter the prosecution's narrative.
Of course, they tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case, suggested that the DNA evidence could have been contaminated, that Jan's memories after so many years might be unreliable.
Classic defense tactics. Did they have any concrete evidence to support those claims?
Not really. Their arguments were weak, lacked any real substance. They couldn't explain away the DNA match, and even the seemingly minor detail of the sock folding technique actually supported the prosecution's case.
Right, because that linked back to Zieler's interview for the battery charge. So after weeks of testimony, evidence, and closing arguments, the case went to the jury. Can you describe that moment, the anticipation in the courtroom as everyone waited for the verdict?
You could feel the tension in the air. It was electric. Everyone was on edge, wondering what the jury would decide.
And after 26 years of waiting, the moment of truth finally arrived. What was the verdict?
Guilty, on all counts.
Wow. Justice. After all that time.
It was a powerful moment. You could see the relief wash over Jan's face. The families of the victims finally had the answers they'd been seeking for so long.
And Zieler, what was his reaction?
He remained emotionless, showing no remorse whatsoever. It's chilling to think about.
It really makes you question how someone can commit such horrific acts and seem so detached from the consequences. So what happened next? What was Zieler's sentence?
Given the nature of the crimes and the overwhelming evidence, the judge sentenced him to death.
The death penalty. It's a heavy sentence, a complicated issue for sure. But in this case, it felt like
the only fitting punishment for the crimes he committed.
it provided a sense of closure, knowing that Zieler would be held accountable for the pain and suffering he caused.
Definitely. And it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, justice can prevail.
This deep dive has been a roller coaster of emotions. It's a story about loss, grief, determination, and the unwavering love of a mother who never gave up on her promise to find her daughter's killer.
Jan Cornell is an inspiration. Her story reminds us that even when hope seems lost, we must never stop fighting for what's right.
And that sometimes justice, though delayed, does arrive. We'll be back soon with another captivating story, another journey into the complexities of the human experience. Until then, stay curious, my friends, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.